day, and hopefully we could pray that the snow doesn't arrive until after we come home. Today we're going to concentrate pretty much on beginning of life issues. There are a couple of new exciting ministries going on in the Archdiocese. One of them is a ministry to couples who've had poor prenatal diagnoses, and if you know that in times and oftentimes their physicians are encouraging them, or strongly encouraging, or sometimes even pushing them to abort. And so the ministry that is coming to us, or that we've had, now helps give support to the women and the men who happen to be unfortunately carrying a child with some genetic anomalies. Another ministry that we're starting up is ministry to couples experiencing infertility. And in your package you'll see information on Lily's Gift. That's the ministry to couples with poor prenatal diagnoses. We're going to see on January 29th where we have a special mass, which I'll talk a little bit about, for couples experiencing infertility over at the Penn Newman Center. We have the third class relic of St. Gerard that's going to be there for us. Some other facts, and we are also beginning now to put together our Gianna ministry, or Gianna Center, centers here in the Archdiocese. The Archbishop gave them permission to set up shop here, and so we're moving along. Dr. Motley, Bob Motley, who's intimately involved with that, will give us a presentation at the end. So, before we go any further, I'd like to introduce to you Jennifer Klepsky. Jennifer is a woman who's been involved with Lily's ministry for a little while. She's got a beautiful, how old is your son? 4 months old. He came into the office the other day and he's a real cutie. So I'd like to bring Jennifer to the floor and ask her if she could give us a little idea now as to what's going on with Lily's Gift. And in the end, if you have any questions for her, we'll try to keep our questions short because we'd like to keep this moving. So Jennifer, why don't you come?
I'm Jennifer Klepsky. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Lily's Gift. I'm a volunteer peer minister for Lily's Gift. In order to qualify to be a volunteer peer minister, you have to have had experienced a loss, a miscarriage, a poor prenatal diagnosis. Unfortunately, I've had a couple of experiences which have qualified me for this position. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then I'll get into what Lily's Gift is all about. On October 31st of 2001, I got a phone call that informed me that a dream that I'd had since I was a child had come true, that I was going to be a mother. And automatically I was ecstatic, had plans, dreams, hopes for this child that I was carrying. I had fears because I was now responsible for someone other than myself. Had questions about what kind of parent I would be. And I just wanted to tell everyone that I was so excited to be carrying a child. At 6 weeks gestation, I had an ultrasound and I saw the most beautiful thing that I think exists was the flashing heartbeat on the screen. And with the pregnancies I've had, that has never gotten old, and it's never ceased to amaze me to see something like that and to realize what a miracle it is to be able to carry a child and carry a child to term and have a healthy child. At 9 weeks gestation, I had a doctor's appointment. They couldn't detect the heartbeat. I knew there was a heartbeat because I had just seen one, and they offered an ultrasound to find out what was going on. And excuse me, I saw a 9-week gestation baby on the screen that had developed limbs that looked forming more like a baby. I was so excited to see how much my child had grown, but then I was devastated to see that that heartbeat was no longer there. So they had recommended a DNC, but I had to be absolutely sure that life had ended, so I had a second opinion that confirmed it. And I called to schedule it, and the nurse had assumed that it was an unwanted pregnancy. And that was extremely devastating to me, and I think something important for anyone in the medical field to take into consideration, to maybe not jump to conclusions or make assumptions about your patient, that if they're calling for a DNC, it may not always be the fact that they're trying to end an unwanted pregnancy. And in fact, my case was, it was a pregnancy that was wanted very badly, but unfortunately ended before I expected it to. That pregnancy was a female. She had Turner syndrome, and I was told that because she had Turner syndrome, maybe it was the best that the pregnancy had ended, because why would you want a child that would have medical problems? But they in fact couldn't be more wrong. I still wanted that child, and I still loved her and had plans and hopes for her. And it didn't matter to me, whatever her disability would have been. A month later, I'd gotten pregnant again, and that also ended in a miscarriage. They called it a chemical pregnancy because that ended relatively quickly. I then got pregnant again. This time was with twins. The one twin was smaller than the other, always a week behind in gestation. They didn't expect that twin would survive. At 6 weeks, one of them had a heartbeat. At 8 weeks, 2 of them had a heartbeat, and at 10 weeks, only one did. And I carried my daughter to term, and she's going to be 11. I then got pregnant again with twins. I had actually prayed for twins after I, lost a twin, and I just felt like, maybe I deserved the double dose after what I'd been through. And I did find I was carrying twins, and then I got scared, and I thought, oh my gosh, please don't let it be 2 girls. I don't know what I'll do with 3 girls in the house. And I didn't want it to be 2 boys, because I never raised a son, but so I was like, maybe if I can just get like a 50-50, like a girl and a boy, that could like work out well for me. Unfortunately, I did have a boy and a girl. At 10 weeks, they consider a high-risk pregnancy when you're carrying a multiple gestation pregnancy. I had an ultrasound. They had done all kinds of screening and things of that nature. My son was twin A. They did his ultrasound. Everything was fine. My daughter was twin B. They had done the ultrasound, and then they froze the screen where her neck and her head was. And she said, "I'll be right back." And she left me there for 45 minutes, staring at the screen, wondering why are they not continuing what's going on. And that's when they came in, and the doctor said, "Before I tell you anything, let me just take some measurements and check again." And that's when they informed me that she had a thickened nuchal fold, and they said that she had about a 30% chance of being healthy, that she would probably have a chromosomal abnormality, a genital heart defect, or Down syndrome. And the recommendation was, because I was carrying 2 babies, was do a selective reduction, because that way I know at least I'm having one healthy baby. And I refused to do it. I refused to have any further testing. I decided to leave it in God's hands and deal with whatever was to come of it. I had taken into consideration the healthy twin and my daughter, and that I could be bringing a child into the world that would have lifelong problems that would then fall on them once I had passed. But I felt that if I can't raise my children to take on that responsibility and be happy that they have a sibling, then maybe I'm not doing my job right. So I went on with the pregnancy. They were born 12 weeks premature. The healthy twin was the sicker twin. My son this is my son's medical records for the first 6 weeks of his life. So his condition was very serious. He was born with a collapsed lung, he had sepsis, he had multiple blood and platelet transfusions. He was recirculating carbon dioxide and required to be placed on an oscillator because he couldn't breathe. And he was also diagnosed with a grade 3 brain hemorrhage, in which they told me that with all the things going on with him medically, they didn't expect him to survive the night. And that had he survived, they weren't sure what his medical prognosis would be with a grade 3 brain hemorrhage, that he possibly could be a paraplegic and stuck in a wheelchair. So a pastor had come to my room, I don't remember what denomination he was, and I felt so sorry for this man because he asked if he could pray at my bedside, and I basically started yelling at him and telling him he had to pray at their bedside. And he had asked what my denomination was. I told him I was Catholic, and he offered to get a Catholic priest in there right away. And a Catholic priest came and performed an emergency baptism on both of them, because I didn't know if my son was going to survive. And at that point, you're kind of like helpless. There's nothing else you can do but put your faith in God and the medical team that they're going to be able to pull him through somehow. So they did the baptism. During the baptism, they checked my son's blood gas, and it was still really bad. And they checked it an hour later, and it got better. And he came home before his sister. And he had, excuse me, a follow-up brain scan when he was 3 years old to check the brain bleed. They couldn't find any signs that there was a brain bleed, although he had had multiple scans in the hospital, so there was definitely no doubt that he had one. And last year he ran his first cross-country race, and he plays hockey and he plays baseball, and he runs around and he does everything that we didn't think he would be able to do. He's amazing. And his sister, although she had health problems, not to the extent that he did, she then developed neck while she was in the hospital, which is a short term for a really long name for bacterial infection of the intestines that's common among premature babies because their bodies are forced to process food that it wouldn't be processing when, in utero, because I was doing that job for them. And they caught it early, and she was able to get antibiotics and not have surgery. And I didn't know until after we left the hospital that it carries a very high mortality rate because of the effect that it does have on the intestines. So after having them, I then went on to have a healthy daughter. I had another daughter. The pregnancy was without any issues. I had ultrasounds with no problems. I didn't have any of the blood testing done or any of the genetic testing done because I just feel that they were wrong when it was with Olivia, and I didn't want to be scared like I was with my pregnancy with my twins and always worry about the health of my baby. I'd rather enjoy my pregnancy and deal with the outcome as it may be. And everything went fine with her. She was born, she was healthy, she was 8 pounds, 10 ounces. At a week old, she was seen by the pediatrician who told me she had a heart murmur, and he wanted it checked out at St. Chris. He didn't think it was more than a heart murmur, but he did want to make sure that it was nothing more than that. I took her to St. Chris. I was told that the worst case scenario with children with a heart murmur is that they have to go on some kind of medication, which I thought was horrible for my now 2-week-old baby to be on medication, but I figured it wasn't the worst case scenario. So the resident listened to her, said it was a heart murmur. The cardiologist listened to her, and he said it sounds like nothing more than a heart murmur, but for completeness, I'd like to do an echocardiogram just to make sure there's nothing else going on in there. And that's when he came back and he told me that it was far worse than they thought, and that my daughter had a serious congenital heart defect. And I was devastated, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's gonna have to be on medication? And he said, oh no, she's gonna need open heart surgery. And if you don't get open heart surgery, she's just gonna die. He said that had the pediatrician not caught it, that she eventually would have just passed in her sleep, and we would have thought baby was 6. But she was diagnosed with double inlet left ventricle, transposition of the great arteries with side-by-side great arteries, atrial septal defect, ventricular septal defect, and right now she's experiencing pulmonary artery dilation. So she had open heart surgery when she was 6 weeks old. Following her surgery, the doctor came in, he told us everything went great, the surgery was a success. They're about to transfer her to the intensive care unit, and they would be in to get us in about an hour. 2.5 hours later, we just assumed they were busy with other children. They come in, and the doctor said, are you Veronica's parents? And we said, yes, we are. And he said, okay, Veronica's okay right now. And that kind of floored me, because I'm like, well, she was okay 2.5 hours ago, what changed? And he said when they transferred her to the intensive care unit, her heart had stopped, and she had to be resuscitated, and that her heart had stopped a total of 5 times, requiring resuscitation every time. They said right now the heart was beating on its own. The doctor said in his 12 years of practice that he had never seen a child have 5 heart resuscitations and not be required to be transferred to a heart and lung bypass machine. He couldn't explain why her heart was beating on her own, but he said the next 24 hours were critical. And my husband and I knew why her heart was still beating, because we had people everywhere praying for her. And we felt that if she wasn't prayed for, maybe it wouldn't have worked out that way. And she had also had an emergency baptism. Once she was diagnosed, we went right to the rectory and arranged for her baptism before her surgery. After Veronica, then I had another daughter who was perfectly healthy. Following her, I had gotten pregnant again and I had another miscarriage. And then I just had my son 4 months ago. And after having a miscarriage and then having my son, we named him Joseph Gerard because St. Gerard was such a huge saint to us that we had prayed to after everything that we had been through. So that's what I had been through. This is Olivia's clothes to kind of bring into perspective how tiny a 3-week premature baby is. She didn't even fit in this. She swam in this outfit. This was her hat. They're gonna be 8 next month. So this morning they were like, "We wore this, we fit in this." They can't even fathom that this was their clothes and this was their hat. But they're doing amazing. So that is what's brought me to Lily's Gift. They had an advertisement in the church bulletin that I read in church on a Sunday, that they were looking for volunteers for his peer ministry, people that had experienced some kind of prenatal diagnosis, with the hopes that you could then help other couples who were going through the same thing. And I thought it was the greatest idea, and I had wished that they had it when I was going through it, especially when my twins were in the NICU. I mean, 6 weeks in the NICU was a really long time. It's a roller coaster, it's emotional, and all you're looking for is for hope. And well-meaning people say things they think are helpful, but I don't think that people understand unless they're actually going through it, just how hard it is. A lot of times people say to us, "Well, I don't know how you do it." Well, we don't have a choice. This is what we've been dealt with, and we deal with it. And just fortunately, we have our faith that we can rely on, and prayer, and it's really benefited us. So Lily's Gift is an organization where they help anyone who has been diagnosed for a prenatal diagnosis that wishes to carry their pregnancy to term. We offer support services, phone calls. We'll go to appointments with them. We will accompany them at the birth of their child. We'll help them develop a birth plan, and we'll make sure that birth plan is executed and followed by working with the hospital staff to try and make it maybe a little bit easier on the parents who already have enough to deal with, as you can understand. We have lots of handouts, and I put them all by the back window here. But Sister Kathleen was asking that, maybe you could post them if you're a clinic, your hospital, your church. If you don't see Lily's Gift advertised in your church bulletin, we're asking that you ask the pastor about it and ask that it be advertised so that we can try and get the word out as much as we can, and reach out to as many people in need as we possibly can. And there's also a mass for persons with disabilities, deaf, community, family, friends, and caregivers that Sister Kathleen wanted me to mention to you on April 12th. And a retreat day also for mothers of children with disabilities on May 6th, 2014. Anyone questions?
Will you accept patients from other than the Archdiocese of Philadelphia?
Yes, actually the first patient to call was from California, and we're offering services all the way out in California right now.
Is this the first Archdiocese in the country to be doing this?
No, I believe it started in North Carolina. It's Be Not Afraid is the ministry that started this, and the Archdiocese of Philadelphia decided to create their own ministry, and then they came up with the name Lily's Gift.
If I could just add a little bit.
Towards that, Be Not Afraid is based out of, I think, Charlotte, North Carolina. And they have a very successful program in the Archdiocese of Washington. I think they're involved in Baltimore. We heard about it through Sister Kathleen and the ministries that she works with. We thought it was a wonderful idea. And we moved to bring it here. Now, Be Not Afraid has kind of grown faster than they were prepared to grow, and so in order for them to work out all their legalities, they asked if we would not use their name, but use their program and whatnot, and we thought that was fine. And there's a meeting towards Lily's gift. I'm not quite sure exactly what the meeting is. Maybe you could fill us in on that one. But Lily was a young girl with a poor prenatal diagnosis. Do you know anything about Lily? Okay. Yes, go ahead. Okay, why don't you come up and talk? This is Dolores Leach. She's from Chester County, who's been working actively in this ministry. And Bishop Fitzgerald's sister.
One thing I might add, one of the reasons why I think you said you do it you're just forced to do it. But one of the things I have to say about these moms and dads who choose to bring their babies to life is because they're brave. It is not an easy decision, and there's a lot of pressure out there to get them to abort or choose other options. And I have to say these families are very brave who decide to bring these babies to term and deal with whatever issues these babies have, because in a lot of cases the doctors are put into positions that they're concerned about being sued, and there's a lot of unknown about these babies being brought to term. But Lily's, the way we were working very closely with BNA. We actually had one family that came this past summer that caught us totally off guard, because I've been working with Sister Kathleen more so in the gifting part of the ministry. And we had a couple that was referred to us from Missouri, and they had a complex heart defect. And they came out to CHOP, and we met with this family, and the mom was amazing because she never had a doubt that she was going to lose her baby. But in the background, we knew that something could happen. But I think because of that family's faith, that baby went home healthy and is continuing to do great. And I think there was a follow-up on this baby that we first dealt with in the Knights of Columbus magazine in the end of December into January, that they did on our little guy, Xavier. And then Lily was actually right around the same time, another family got diagnosed with a poor prenatal diagnosis. And the baby did not go as far as expected and had a lot of problems, but this was our first baby that we got, and they named her Lily, and it was taken from a Bible verse for the lily of the valley, or the lilies of the field, that they chose. We kind of decided to go with Lily's gift. This Chetta, I think the last name is Lily Chetta, was the name of this little girl. And this family continues to work with us and help with the vision of this ministry, along with working very closely with Be Not Afraid, Isaiah's Promise. But it is a wonderful ministry that Sister is spearheading, and we're getting great peer ministers, and you know, we could use a lot of support throughout the Archdiocese.
Doctor?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little comment, should I?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Great story. I'm Dr. Isayu, many of you know me, but I'm not an obstetrician. I'm general internal medicine, but it was involved a lot of counseling pregnant women. But just based on our own personal experience, and my wife and myself, and as well as others that we've counseled, just wanted to emphasize a couple points. First of all, there is a perinatal hospice program that's run by Dr. Byron. And Bob, I can't remember it's his first name or his last name, but he's in the University of West Virginia. He was the past president of the pro-life obstetricians organizations. And if you look up on the internet, perinatal hospice, just make sure it's the one that's associated with him. It's a Byron, B-Y-R-O-N. I can't remember whether it's his first or his last name, but and they have a very good. One of the families we worked with who had an anencephalic baby recently utilized his resources, and he's got some books printed, and he actually counseled them over the phone, free of charge, and spent a lot of time. So that, but what I wanted to emphasize is this, you know, you say children with a poor prenatal diagnosis or prognosis, you know, doctors are often wrong. And I learned from my own experience and others, the diagnosis and the prognosis is not always correct. And this is why, you know, when you act on the incorrect diagnosis or an incorrect, you may never know that it was incorrect. And one of the issues is even when truly, let's say, heartbeat has stopped, it's not necessarily to do a D&C or a D&E. You may just wait. Now, I know they're always worried about complications of the woman developing clotting disorders, etc. But with modern medicine, you can test blood tests every week to make sure those clotting disorders do not occur. And then eventually a natural miscarriage will take place. And I remember one case where a woman had bleeding and kept on bleeding, and as a pro-life doctor, did the ultrasound, there was no heartbeat. And he said, based on that, because of bleeding, we should go ahead and do a D&C. And of course, that would have been ethically and morally okay if the baby was truly dead. And I advised the woman, I said, you know, get a couple more blood tests for the human chorionic, the level, the hormone level, because let's make sure it's dropped, that the baby is really dead. And it hadn't dropped, it hadn't gone up, it was kind of borderline. And I said, well, you know, we can always transfuse you if you bleed enough, but she wasn't bleeding that much. I said, let's just wait. And you know, she stopped bleeding. And that ultrasound was wrong. The baby's heartbeat was there. And the hormone went up, and the baby was born eventually and was perfectly normal. And they would have done that D&C and would have never known. Because, so that, and just one quick experience that we experienced ourselves. We had 2 pregnancies in a row where the children died, one at age 16 weeks and one at 18. So this would be called an intrauterine fetal death. And everything was going along fine, and suddenly there was no more heartbeat. And again, there was, you know, advice to do, you know, various procedures, etc. And we chose not to. And again, several weeks later, my wife delivered, you know, a dead child. But at least we saw the child. We were able to have a funeral service, and you know, that was tremendously important. So, but this is my message: is say, you know, can't go by the diagnosis. If you can wait, you wait, and you see what happens, and miracles do happen, and I've witnessed it. And I'm just going to end on one other thing: is after those 2 pregnancies, we had to get some testing done to see if there was something genetically wrong or something. They couldn't find anything wrong with any one of us, but this Dr. Laird Jackson, who was the big guy at Jefferson at that time, had been my professor when I was a student, but unfortunately, you know, he was a pro-abortion guy, and he said, "There's nothing wrong with you, but I would advise you not to have any more children." And you know, at that point, I got a little angry at him because I didn't like it when I was a student either. And I said, "Well, how can you give us that kind of advice, directive advice, when you're so, you know, pro-choice? Shouldn't that be, you know, our choice and our decision?"
Oh.
And he kind of backed off a little bit. Well, since then, we had our 3 very healthy boys, came 1 year apart, and thank God we did not follow his advice. So I just want to let you know that.
Before we move on, I want to mention that we're not finished with the expansion of Lily's Gift here in the Archdiocese. There's a number of ways that we could expand on that. Now, Dr. Frank McNesby, I'm not sure if anybody know Dr. Frank. He's been involved with the Catholic Medical Association in the Archdiocese for many years. Great guy, pediatrician over at Children's Hospital, I believe, or Drexel. But anyway, he's been working with Sister Kathleen on there, and one of the things that I'd like to do with the ministry is to build a cohort of physicians that specialize in pediatrics, especially in neonatal care, because it's important not only to give the women and the men the support that they're given with the ministry now, but it's also important to be able to lead them to physicians that are going to support life. And, you know, so that's our next step in this. When that's going to happen, I'm not quite sure. We want to be able to make sure that this phase of it is up and running before we start another phase. But once we're up and running, that we will be taking that next step. So the physicians that are in the audience, or any of your friends or family that are physicians and nurses, you know, ultimately we're going to call on them, you know, to be a part of this ministry, so we could have another way of helping these couples and these families. So thank you very much for everybody that talked to us.